Hello, my name is Ihor Dvorkin, and I am the director of the Center for the Study of the Holocaust, Genocide, and Crimes Against Humanity at the Graduate Center, City University of New York. I am honored and I am humbled to thank our Ukrainian colleagues, Yulia, Artem, Ihor, and Anatoly, for their generosity of spirit and of scholarship. And it is my pleasure to thank you, everyone who has joined. You show your support with your presence. This event is hosted in association with the Ralph Bunche Institute for International Studies and its Deputy Director, Eli Karetny. The Center for Jewish Studies at the Graduate Center and its director, Francesca Bregoli, and the Mandel Center for Advanced Holocaust Studies at the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum and its director, Lisa Leff. I am grateful for our shared effort. Time is short and the matter is grave. Without further ado, I turn to the co-chair of our panel today, Elissa Bemporad, Professor of History and the Ungar Professor in Eastern European Jewish History and the Holocaust at Queens College and the Graduate Center. And I turn to the chair of this event, Dr. Natalya Lazar, Director of the Initiative on Ukrainian Jewish Shared History and the Holocaust in Ukraine at the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum. Elissa, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Deborah. It is tremendously important for us to come together and have this discussion. It is our responsibility as a scholarly community to counter with facts Moscow's false narrative used to legitimize its horrific war of aggression against Ukraine by distorting history, by demonizing Ukrainians as fascists, and by presenting Russia as the world redeemer of Nazism. How do we support Ukraine? First of all, I encourage everyone who joined us today to make a donation to Razom, which in Ukrainian means together. You should see the link in the Q&A. Second, we should listen to the many scholars, but also poets, journalists, writers from Ukraine who are speaking and writing the truth. By sharing with us their words about the past and the present, the scholars who will be presenting today are engaging in an act of resistance, resisting the violence of the present and the distortion of the past. Let me introduce the moderator of today's panel, my friend and colleague, Natalya Lazar, who is program manager of the Initiative on Ukrainian Jewish Shared History and the Holocaust in Ukraine at the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum in DC, where she organizes scholarly programs that focus on the Holocaust in Ukraine. She holds a PhD in political science from the Chernivtsi National University in Ukraine and is working toward a second PhD from the Strassler Center for Holocaust and Genocide Studies at Clark University, where she is completing a dissertation entitled Chernovitz Jews and the Holocaust: Violence, Interethnic Relations, and Survival in a Borderland City. Natalya, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Deborah. It's an honor to be here and join you in organization of this event. It's a true privilege for me to moderate this event and also to introduce our Ukrainian colleagues and speakers. Our first guest is Yulia Abibok, who is joining us today from Berlin. Yulia is a Ukrainian researcher and journalist, originally from the city of Donetsk in Ukraine. In 2008, Yulia graduated from Donetsk National University with a degree in journalism. She further continued her education at studies at the National University of Kiev Mohila Academy, where she enrolled in a graduate program and started work on a dissertation focusing and analyzing Donbas regional identities since the declaration of independence of Ukraine. Yulia's interests are very varied. She's keenly looking into the Ukrainian history of ethnic violence. She's currently also pursuing her MA degree in Jewish studies at the same institution in Kiev Mohila Academy in Kiev. Starting from today, I don't have enough time to name all esteemed fellowships and awards that she received, but starting from today, she's joining a fellowship at the WZB Berlin Social Science Center. And in October this year, she will be continuing her work and research as a junior research fellow at the Vienna Wiesenthal Institute for Holocaust Studies. Our next speaker, Ihor Dvorkin, is a Kharkiv-based historian, currently joining us from the Lviv area. Dr. Ihor Dvorkin is associate professor at the Department of Ukrainian and Cultural Studies and the History of Science at the National Technical University of Kharkiv Polytech Institute. He defended his candidate dissertation in 2009 with a topic focusing on evolution and transformation of Ukrainian Museum in Dnipro, Ukraine, between 1805 and 1920. Ihor has keen interest in the topics dealing with the nation-building process, ethnic violence in Ukraine, Holocaust, and genocide studies. He's a member and co-founder of a very prominent and known in Ukraine and abroad NGO Center for Interethnic Relations Research in Eastern Europe. In addition to many activities, teaching, researching, Ihor is also, together with Kharkiv colleagues, started a new project. He's a member and content producer of the digital project called Don't Forget Kharkiv. This project is specifically focuses and dedicated to the memory of the victims of World War II and Holocaust victims in Ukraine. Joining us also another Kharkiv historian, Artem Kharchenko. Artem Kharchenko gained his title of Candidate of Science, which is equivalent to American PhD in history in 2012. He's Associate Professor at the Department for Ukrainian and Cultural Studies and the History of Science at the National Technical University of Kharkiv Polytechnic Institute. Similarly to Ihor, he is a member and co-founder of the NGO Center for Interethnic Relations Research in Eastern Europe, led by their colleague and friend and Holocaust researcher Yuri Radchenko. Artem is known for his work, both public work and also research work, dealing with various issues and genocide study, including Holodomor and Holocaust history in Ukraine. Artem is a known historian in Ukraine, but he's also known as a public intellectual, talking about various challenging and complicated, contested, I would say, topics in Ukraine's history. Among many prestigious awards, Dr. Kharchenko got a scholarship of the Rothschild Foundation for the study of Jewish communities in Eastern Europe. He was also supported by DID scholarship for his project on Jewish community in the space of Russian imperialist city Kharkiv in 19th and the turn of 20th century. He was also awarded by Holodomor Resource Educational Center to conduct a research project dealing with the forcible transfers of children in the Soviet Union. And last but not least, joining us today from Kiev, Anatoly Podolsky, who is a known Holocaust educator and researcher, head and director of the Ukrainian Center for Holocaust Studies. He's also a senior researcher of the Department of Political Theory and History, head of the Center for Jewish History and Culture of the Kurs Institute of the Political and Ethnic Studies at the National Academy of Sciences of Ukraine. Anatoly Podolsky was among the first Ukrainian researchers and scholars who defended dissertation work in 1996 dealing with the Holocaust history in Ukraine. He has numerous publications that I don't have time to name them here, but I would like to know that his English articles were dealing with subjects as collaboration in Ukraine during the Holocaust, as well as sexual violence against Jewish women during the Holocaust. Last but not least, I would like to add a personal note that the work that Anatoly Podolsky and his colleagues are doing at the Ukrainian Center for Holocaust Studies paid the work for many researchers and inspired a new generation of Ukrainian scholars that previously didn't have access to key works in Holocaust history or primary sources that highlighted Jewish voices, Jewish experiences in the occupied Ukraine. So I would like to add a thank you note to him and his colleagues, including Mikhailo Tyaghly and others who got involved in this translation and educational work. Thank you. I would like to now to draw attention of our audience that you can send your questions in a Q&A box. Please don't wait until the time. If you have a question, send it now, and we will try to make a room and bring it up to our speakers. Ukraine has been on the major headline in many world news today, and as I always joke with my colleagues, I wish it would be for a better or happy opportunity. I would like to start our discussions today with a very simple questions, and I will turn to Yulia, and I would like to hear her experience and how did it happen? What were her first reactions? Were her thoughts and her experience? What is happening in Ukraine and what has happened there? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Natalia and colleagues. Actually, my war started in 2014. So I'm at war for about 8 years, and what happened this February was not a surprise. And as a journalist, unfortunately, I followed everything what was reported about this Russian buildup. So let's say I had no distraction because I just needed to follow it. And when it actually happened, the Russian invasion, I was rather relieved before. Maybe it's kind of phenomenon which was described by historians related to Stalin's terror, when people were just felt relieved after being arrested, after waiting for being arrested for days or weeks or months. And my backpack for the most necessary and important things, it was already by late December. It's not about it wasn't about me getting ready to leave Kyiv, for example, or Ukraine. It's just about having everything necessary and everything important for my work, and I don't know, in general, just in case my apartment will be destroyed, so I will save what I need or what I have to say, including several books which went here with me in Berlin, including a very heavy dictionary of medieval Judeo-Arabic texts. It's about 3-kilo dictionary, but it was one of the latest copies in Amazon, which I acquired just several days before the war. So I evacuated it in Berlin. That's it.
Thank you, Yulia. It's remarkable that the first thing researchers and scholars are turning, it's usually books in times of distress, and saving them and carrying them everywhere we can. Thank you. Ihor, could you please join us and tell us about your experiences in Kharkiv?
Yes, thank you very much. I would like to try to share my screen. It works. I hope. Yes. Can you see my screen? Okay. The war began for Kharkiv residents with the sounds of explosions in the early morning of February 24. I think that everything became clear for everyone at once. When I went to work with my dog at 6 p.m., there was a long line behind the water vending machine near our house. And in a few days, I have seen pictures with murdered people near the same machine. And of course, it was after Russian bombing. For the first 2 days, public transport continued to operate, but in the middle of the first day of the war, the subway stopped running and becoming a shelter for citizens, as you can see, on these pictures. By the way, for those 2 days, my family, 7-year-old daughter and wife, and I hid in this subway, and it's a picture from the first day of war for us. Additionally, in the first day, in addition to the actual shelling, Russian sabotage groups in the city, which is close to the border, became a danger to the citizens. And some days they were a few hundred meters away from our location. And my friends met them, for example, on their way home from the store. And it's a real shocking situation. Thanks to my colleague Artem Kharchenko, who is present today, and my friend Artem Kharchenko. In the following days, my family had the opportunity to stay in his private house with a cellar. And it's turned out having your own basement in the house. It's of great value during the war. And you can see in this picture my wife and my daughter in Artem's basement. And
Can
I
you
would like.
I'm sorry, I apologize. Can you please show the photo because you didn't open?
Can you see the photo? No?
Only the first one. You have to press the bottom to the next one.
And what about, can you see it now? The second photo. I will. No. Okay, yes. Maybe I will send this presentation to.
We can see it.
Now you can see it, yes? The second picture was this one, this first day of war. And this in the shelter, and Artem's shelter, this the third one. And I would like to say about some values of this war and some features of this war. As for me, the darkness became one of the signs of war in Kharkiv, literally darkness. After 6 p.m., the curfew begins and all street lights do not turn on, and the city is completely still until the morning 6 a.m. This is especially felt in private buildings where our family stayed. I would like to tell, as I said, about values. The first value of war in war Kharkiv was is the access to information. It is very important to have up-to-date information, not outdated for several hours. I want to emphasize the significant role of Seraphim radio or rumors. It helped many people to get food, humanitarian aid, evacuate from the city. The next one is what is important is to interpret the sounds of explosions, whether our military is striking or the city is being attacked. Perhaps the most crucial thing is phone and internet connection. Without it, it is impossible to follow the updates of information. The next is the availability of water, drinking water, food, money, cash money, and that is very important. Also, of course, medicine, pet food. As I could see, the longest lines were at pharmacies and the pet shops. The availability of the one's own transport becomes a means of survival during the war, not just mobility. And I would like to add that as I can see, and as my friend said, an important feature of the war is the lack of any planning. People usually plan for no more than the next day, maybe for next hours. And a sign of the war of Kharkiv, of current war, is an intra-city migration from one district to relatively safety one. It's dangerous anywhere, but people, even with children, prefer to stay and not to evacuate. They are afraid to go into the unknown if they have food supplies, electricity, and relative stability in Kharkiv. And a few more words about my family. My daughter, wife, and mother managed to evacuate by train in early March. The most difficult quest was to get to the railway station in Kharkiv without your own transport or drivers. Prices for the taxi ride, which lasted 30 or 40 minutes, were 10 or 20 times higher than before the war. The next step for those evacuated by rail was to get on the train. This could take from tens of minutes to 10 or more hours. First of all, women, children, and old people were allowed on the train. Many of them were with pets. The road to Western Ukraine was 25 or sometimes 30 hours. And already being in relative safety, our family got shocking news. And it was the destruction of our home in Kharkiv. A rocket hit the high-rise building and destroyed almost the entire entrance. And the next day, a fire completely destroyed practically all of our apartment and property. And thanks God, by miracle, no one was injured. And on these pictures, you can see almost all the things that were saved after destruction of our apartment, after rocket attack in the mid of March. It's all that left from our apartment in Kharkiv. And that's all for the first round. Thank you.
Ihor, thank you so much for sharing your story. Thank you so much for showing these images. I understand that most of our audience and all our experts understand how precious those few things are, and what you went through. And just would like to add a personal note that we're very happy to see you and Artem made from Kharkiv to Lviv safely.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ihor. Artem, could you join us and tell a little bit about your own thoughts and experiences?
Yes, thank you, Natalia, for introducing me. Hi all, I'm glad to see everyone in here, and I'm feeling your support. And thank to the organizers for the opportunity to be one of the speakers today. It's really honor for me. As Natalia mentioned, I'm historian from Kharkiv. I work at Kharkiv Technical University and University of Art. At both, I'm teaching courses for students non-historian. First of all, the course about history of Ukraine, but also courses about the history of the Holocaust. Usually when I have a presentation, I talk about my research. I study the Jewish population on the late Imperial Russia. And this year I planned to finish a draft of my book, The Jewish Community in the Space of Imperial City. As a lecturer, I'm immersed in genocide studies, Holocaust studies. I have experience in different educational programs, and many of my educational travels were organized by the center, our next speaker, Anatoly Podolsky. And last several years, I have been the Holocaust lecturer of the Partnership University Program with Claims Conference in Kharkiv. But after February 24, I didn't return to my book, and I'm a real procrastinator. but this time the reason for the stop was quite unexpected. The war that Russian Federation launched against Ukraine. I met the war with my family in Kharkiv. After 11 days, I moved to Lviv, the Center for Urban History, when I am working now on a research project and helping with displaced persons, whom the center has housed in its shelter. My wife and daughter crossed the Romanian border and now live in an apartment provided by New Europe College, when I had the honor of being a fellow. I wouldn't like to talk about the fighting or the crimes of the Russian army in this war and in Kharkiv. I won't be able to do this at the level of military experts or journalists of CNN. My photos or videos won't be better than those that show all the world's news. I will say just a few words referring to my parents, brother, friends who remain in Kharkiv. And during the 77 days of the war, the longest interval without shelling of the city lasted 8 hours. Every day, the Russian army destroys or damages several buildings, most of which are schools and residential buildings. During the war, at least 3 students from my university were killed, one of whom was an Indian citizen. I would like to say more about my own feelings. The experience that I gained during these months was very difficult to comprehend in Kharkiv, a war zone. It means that Russian missiles, multi-launch rocket system hit the city every hour. I'm constantly trying to rethink this question for myself once in a zone of relative safety. On the one hand, as a historian whose theme is the Holocaust, I realistically imagined the possibility of such events, their content and danger. On the other hand, as a human, I couldn't believe in the reality of the war until the last moment. I didn't doubt my profession for the reason that I didn't realize the beginning of the war. It seems to me that a human who hasn't seen the war cannot really understand the experience of the survivor. But this is not an accusation. It seems to me that it's very normal not to understand the war. I'm sorry that this is now our common Ukrainian experience. My students will understand me differently, and I will talk about the war differently after this time. Thank you for attention.
Thank you, Artem. You actually addressed one of the questions that we received from the audience from David Korostersky, which was which he wrote, I teach my students here in the US that rarely does a leader put 2,100 troops on the foreign border to not use them. Why did so many Ukrainian people think the invasion would not happen? I think you answered. It's still very hard to believe and grasp what is happening to many people in Ukraine. Thank you for sharing your experience with us. Anatoly Yuhemovich. Anatoly Yuhemovich joining us from Kiev. Could you please tell us a little bit more about the first 36 days of the Russian invasion in Kiev? That's how Ukrainians are counting now. Also, the war started in 2014, and Yulia reminded us at the beginning, but could you please tell us more about your thoughts about it? Share with us. Thank you.
Thank you, dear Natalia. You know, in general, I need 3-4 hours, but I will have tried 3-4 minutes. For me, it's a challenge. If seriously, first of all, thanks to my colleagues, I'm very happy to see my colleagues from Kharkiv and Donetsk. And for me, it's a big honor, your invitation. And it's really demonstrate solidarity from US, from our American partners, from United States Holocaust Museum and our institutions. It's really, I want to tell you thank you so much for your solidarity with Ukraine, with Ukrainian scholars. For us, it's brilliant, important now. Absolutely, it's true. It's not compliment. It's true. About Kiev front line. I agree absolutely with Yulia. It was to start not 24 February. It started 20 February 2014. My country, it's, you know, it's an action part of my country from Putin criminal regime and people suffering in this part of Ukraine. What happened 24 February, it's a, you know, it's for me, it's a absolutely brutal aggression, totalitarian Russia against democratic Ukraine. It's a terrible aggression. And it's about my private experience, what connect in my family between 20 February 2014 and 24 February 2022. My, how do you say in English, mother of my wife, yes? It's a lady more 80 years old. It's a lady was born during World War II, yes? And during summer 2014, she was in Lugansk under Russian bombs. Eight years ago, she afraid so strong. And my wife, we took them to Kiev and saved them. It was October 2014. It was really extremely dangerous. My wife, I proud, it's hero. She took parents, but her father already died in Kiev, and mother still alive, thanks God. But now, 5 o'clock morning, 24 February, Russian attacks and bomb in Kiev, and it's an old lady, 80 years old, again under Russian bombs. You know, it's absolutely crime. For me, I will honest, sorry, it's a typical, you know, we as a historian, World War II history, Holocaust history. Now, for me, it's not only Putin regime; it's a Russian society responsible for this. A lot. It's a lot. This big, huge discussion, but for me, it's a terrible. A lot relatives from wife side of my wife side, her relatives, you know, from wife side. Yeah, 95% live in Russia. They hate us. They spoke with us via telephone and via internet. They hate Ukraine. They hate very close people, very relative people. It's, you know, how do we say, nephew? My wife during 30 years ago or more, she helped for small children during Lugansk Oblast, during this part of Ukraine. She helped for grow up then. Now it's a people 30 years old, more 33, 35 years old, and they hate us. They hate us. They live last 16 years. They lived in Moscow or around Moscow, and they really believe Putin propaganda. It's an example. We're discussing not about different people. We're discussing very close people, you know. But it's a long story. But it's a private. What parallel for me? Kiev is my home city. I was born here 54 years ago. In my family, it's our home city, and as you know very good, I remember my childhood. My mother unfortunately died. Next year, my mother will be 100 years old. But my father, it's in 1921. My mother, 1923. It's a war generation of World War II. You know, my mother died 20 years old. But I very good remember her words during my childhood. Kiev bombed 4 o'clock morning, Wehrmacht and German troops in 1941. 4 o'clock morning, or approximately 5 o'clock morning, 24 February, Kiev again bombed, but not Wehrmacht, Russian troops. It's a forever. It's a forever, absolutely. I have, you know, I feel inside me now, not as historian, not only as historian, as Ukrainian citizen. Now I feel two feeling, at least, hate to enemy. Enemy is the Russian Federation. It's not only Putin regime, it's the Russian Federation. And the very strong belief to my people, to my country, to my friends, to Ukrainian army. It's today, it's the last month. Yeah, it's it's very easy to understand. We are fighting for freedom. We are fighting for human rights, for dignity. And Putin regime hate Ukraine, really hate. From 2014, not 2014, from, I don't know, from after collapse Soviet Union, what in my subjective, in my particular opinion, he won't come back us to concentration camp. Title of this concentration camp? Soviet Union, Soviet Empire, we don't want to come back to concentration camp. I very good, of course, a lot of people know, last sentence, a lot of people know Soviet writer Anatoly Kuznetsov from Kiev. He wrote a roman about Babin Yar, yes. And he escaped from Soviet Union. He escaped to London, to Great Britain, and first interview to CBS or BBC, to CBS, it was 52 years ago, 1969, so 53 years ago. He told, I escaped from concentration camp. NKVD, KGB, it's Gestapo. He told in his interview 53 years ago. And now it's a challenge. Ukraine and generation of my colleagues, Artem, Igor, Yulia, I very happy all these colleagues participate in different times in educational project of Ukrainian Center for Holocaust Studies. I love my job. It's not job, it's my life. And of course, now it's a challenge for Holocaust teaching, Holocaust studies, Holocaust education after Russian aggression, after Ukraine will win in this war, I am sure. Again, maybe it's my first and last in Kiev. It's my private story. Last sentence. In Kiev, it's a picture Kiev September 1941 and Kiev February March 2022. Very similar. These special blocks, defenders, people, these weapons. How do we say, special times for forbidding people live from them apartment to outside, every time danger. And our night, my son and his wife live another bench of Dnipro River. Full month, till end of March, I cannot visit to my son. 10 kilometers from my house to his. It's a dangerous. At least in Kiev, 5-7 sirens, bombs attacks till today. And in Kharkiv, my colleagues in Kharkiv, it's terrible. Mariupol is terrible, all terrible. But now it's my home city. It's a front line city. It's thanks. It's first impression. Sorry for emotion.
Thank you. I'm sure it's understandable and our audience will understand what you're feeling right now. Thank you, Anatoly. I see the questions that are coming in our Q&A chat, and most of them are actually addressing what we all have on mind. What is next? When this war is going to be over? How peace can be achieved in Ukraine? How can we teach and educate our students about this event and also about the Holocaust? I would like to turn again to Yulia, and of course you don't have to answer all the questions, but please share with us your thoughts. Thank you.
I think I should address the question about the Azov battalion because it's quite predictable, but also quite drastic. I haven't researched the issue, but I have researched the issue related to Mariupol when the Azov battalion was standing. Still, it's my home region, and so I could claim that I know these moods quite well there. And one should understand, I think, that for locals, for people who see this so-called Donetsk Republic and also this so-called Luhansk Republic as a huge concentration camp, which is partly true, and which is why I haven't been in my home city of Donetsk for 8 years. I just lost access to there. For the city, for these people in Mariupol, Azov battalion was, it wasn't in any case about Nazis. No one cares about their moods. For them, and especially now, these people, part of them supposedly are Nazis, and part of them are Ukrainian nationalists, and part of them like rather adventurers. For locals in Mariupol, the people are just people who protect them from this so-called Donetsk Republic to coming on to creating another concentration camp in Mariupol, in the city of Mariupol. So I think I insist that we should differentiate these issues related to Azov battalion. For locals, they stayed in there since 2014. This men from Azov, they are rather now they're just a part of the local community, and they're a very, very important part. And they took a lot of efforts not to annoy locals and to become really this part of inhabitants of Mariupol. What about the rest of questions, and especially about how we could win this war? I suppose we should address first, we should address this question to Russians and to Russian civil society and to Russian intellectuals, because it is their responsibility to handle these issues with their president, with their government, and with their army. But for what about Ukraine? It's rather we should continue to fight, and it's also about me, because I left for Germany, for Berlin, just for a while, and I'm going to come back. Not to fight, but just to report as a journalist and to continue my field research, which is very important to me. And these incredible volunteers in Berlin arranged me bulletproof vest and helmet and some protective equipment just to make my work in Ukraine possible. So from my side and from the side of my colleagues who are still staying in Ukraine, it's just about to continue our work by the means we have. Thank you.
Thank you, Yulia. So the question that Yulia addressed was about the Azov battalion, but it also had a second part about the Nazi sympathizers and how this rhetoric is being used in the Russian war against Ukraine. So if any of you can address that, that would be great. Turning to next speaker, Ihor. Another questions that we're also getting is from Barbara Rilko-Bauer, how can US scholars help and support Ukrainian researchers?
Well, I would like to add some to what Anatoly Efimovich said, and maybe some words about future and maybe about helping to Ukrainian researchers. Well, as in Kiev, for many of my Kharkiv friends with whom I spoke, memories of their mostly grandparents about the beginning of the war, Second World War, became relevant. They often revisit scenarios of that war, such as scenarios of survival, evacuation, being at the front line or in the rear. Also, we have some historical parallels in our contemporary discourse, and I read an article that Artem wrote about this. As well known in Ukraine and abroad, the pediatric doctor Evgen Komarovsky, who has been in Kharkiv, said that he calls this current war of 2022 the great liberation war of the Ukrainian people against the Russists invaders. And here we can see the analogy with the great patriotic war with fascist invaders or German invaders from Soviet and post-Soviet discourse. And also we have find a lot of parallels of this current war and World War II. Maybe it will be used in future discourse of in national politics of memory and so on. Also, I would like to add about evacuation from Kharkiv. There was some questions about Jewish community and Holocaust studies. Thanks to my colleague, Dr. Yulia Kharchenko, who was mentioned earlier by Natalya, I was able to evacuate from Kharkiv together with the Jewish community of the city. For many days, buses left Kharkiv Choral Synagogue located in the heart of the city. And this synagogue is located closely near to the Nikolsky shopping complex, which was completely destroyed by direct heat. According to Yuri, and he's a known Ukrainian Holocaust researcher, this is one of the largest relocation of the city's Jewish community in its history. Most of the Jewish community was evacuated abroad for further repatriation to Israel. For the second time, I managed to evacuate together with Jewish community of Dnipro. And I would like to note that the extremely good organization of this process and the care of volunteers and Jewish organizations. And I would like to say some words about future also. What is the future? As I can see, we are changing. Ukrainians are changing during this war. For example, in Kharkiv, communal workers could not repair the roof in my house for several years. But today, the same people skillfully restore water supply or electricity supply under the Russian fire. Also, temporarily occupied Melitopol or Kherson people come out with demonstration with Ukrainian flags, make it clear that they are not going to Russia. In Lviv, people unite also. I know a family sheltered 12 people in two-room apartment in Lviv. So in the future, Ukraine will be another country with people who have changed. And it's, I think, should be soon. How you can support Ukrainian scholars? I think that this solidarity event is very important because everybody should know truth, should know our position about this current war, and maybe it could be the beginning of some other events that Ukrainian scholars, journalists, and others will share their thoughts about war in US and in Europe. Thank you.
Thank you, Ihor. Before I turn to Artem, I just would like to make a note that we are getting messages of support from our audience, in particular from Wendy Lauer, sending deep gratitude, care, respect for your work, strength, and endurance of this tragedy in my thoughts and heart. Thank you to everyone. There are also many questions that are puzzling again about the relations between Ukrainians and Russians. And one question is from Nancy Adler, whether Ukrainian scholars are in contact with Russian civil society. And another question from Andrew Mayra is asking, what sense does it make for Russians and Ukrainians all these years after World War II to even use the terms Nazi and fascist? Artem, I don't put these questions on you, but if you can address that would be great. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And I try to talk about this moment. And I'd like to talk about two ideas. And first of all, for last weeks, I got many messages, many letters about how to help Ukrainian researchers. And from one hand, I wouldn't want my advantage as a researcher to be only that I am a citizen of Ukraine. But from other hand, I understand the situation with many of my colleagues. And in my opinion, today we should not talk about the challenges of the future, but about the current situation. There are those researchers who are in occupied cities like Kherson or Melitopol. There are those who are in dangerous zone, Kharkiv, Chernihiv, Kyiv, etc. Perhaps right now these people need support, perhaps financially, for example, in the form of non-residential scholarship, perhaps an option with guest lectures, of course, online. Women researchers can go out and become visiting researchers. And I know that many universities in Europe, in the USA, and many other countries, foundations and individual researchers are now helping Ukrainian scientists. And believe me, this solidarity is very important. I'm very glad to feel this support as a researcher from Ukraine and as a citizen of this country. And about future, I have no doubt Ukrainian researchers will continue their work, joint projects with colleagues from other countries, further integration into Holocaust studies. But today I have another question about Russian society, about Russian scientists, about Russian humanitarians. And I'm sure you hear a lot this news about in the field of culture, about the cancel culture. But that moment when the use of great Russian culture by modern Russia is actually a screen behind which Russian authorities and unfortunately many opinion makers in Russian society want to hide mad aggressions, not only against Ukraine today, but previous against Chechnya, against Georgia, Syria, and other countries. And it seems to me that the world's response to Russian humanitarians, including the field of Holocaust studies, should be equivalent to the one mentioned above. I'm not calling for a ban on all Russian researchers, but if the researchers represents one of the state Russian universities, let me remind you that dozens of heads of these universities signed a letter that approved the aggression against Ukraine. How can we invited some university receive a scholarship, become a participant in a joint project outside of Russia? If a Russian researcher supported the current policy and never objected to it, and after Ukraine, silence is no longer enough to represent such a person as an oppositionist, how can he be accepted anywhere outside of Russia? By taking decisions against such researchers from Russia, you're not taking our Ukrainian side. You are taking the side of democracy and freedom, sorry for the passus, against dictator and war crimes. You do not support those who turn a blind eye to the destroyed cities, murdered children, raped women, Kharkiv, Chernihiv, Mariupol, Kherson, and many other Ukrainian cities. Give me for my emotions. My excuse is my daughter and wife who have been in Bucharest for 3 weeks, but cannot forget the Russian rocket explosions. There are my parents who stayed in Kharkiv, and I call them every day, hoping to hear their voices. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Artem. Yeah, thank you. I think that these questions are coming, from these pronotions even before the war that that still dominates the field, not only our field, but Slavic field, right? About the closeness of Ukrainians and Russians. So hence those questions. And thank you for being frank, and thank you for drawing attention actually to the current situation, because we cannot think about the future until we sort things out now. Thank you. Atina Grossman writes to us, yeah, thank you very much for this event. We here in the US, despite all we know as historians, need to be reminded about all that we cannot in fact really imagine. And yet we want to do what we can. So thank you for letting us know that it's truly useful. I would like to turn again to Anatoly Podolsky, and one of the questions that again pop up, and if you can please address it. One of the questions was about sources and Holocaust studies and current state and the future. But thank you, Anatoly. If you have any thoughts that you can share, please turn on the mic. Anatoly Himich, Mike.
You heard me, sorry.
No, we didn't, but now we can.
You heard, yeah. Sorry, I changed my location. It was Syrian in Kyiv. I was in shelter together with his wife and dog. Sorry, I changed location now. It's again danger. And this, excuse me for this situation.
Well, thank you
tried
for
to-
staying with us. If it's not safe, maybe.
No. Still no, normal. It's I agree with Igor and Artem absolutely. With my colleagues, I just few words about I will try very briefly. First of all, Ukraine will change after war. I agree with Igor 100%. I received, our center last month. We try help our colleagues, not only staff of Ukrainian Center Holocaust Studies. Our colleagues as Artem, Igor, Yulia, we try together with our institution in Germany, in Poland, in France. We try together. We try help to people, to our colleagues, teachers first of all, and scholars who immigrate, who evacuated, who remain in occupied, who in front line. Today I received letter from teacher, the deputy director of secondary school in Melitopol, 1 hour ago. In Melitopol today, the principal of schools, really against Russian occupation, they stopped work in school. In Melitopol, already Russians press Ukrainian teachers start teach according Russia textbooks and ideology. And she wrote me 1 hour ago, two principals of school already arrested. Repression now, during the discussion, now repression in Melitopol, repression in Kherson, now in this moment. And what Igor told, Ukraine is, it's not 2040. Kherson, Berdyansk, Melitopol, the cities under Russians, people, civilians, really resistance to Russian occupation. It's really changed. And I agree with Igor again. And a few words about general conception, what happened, what will in future. In future, first of all, we will win. It's number one. Number two, we will win. Number three, we will win. And what continue? Mr. Propaganda, anti-Ukrainian propaganda from Russia, from Putin, one of point of this propaganda, it's a Russian-speaking people, Russian ethnic original, danger in Ukraine, yes? And what Russians did? They bombed Kharkiv, Mariupol, Chernihiv, Sumy, Akhtirka. It's the most Russian-speaking people. And he last 8 years, he told about he will defend Russian-speaking. He killed Russian-speaking last month. And about anti-Semitism, it's so for Putin regime, so not good. Current president of my country, Jewish original, yeah, and it's not good, yeah, for anti-Semitic propaganda in Ukraine. And about what happened last month, memorials of Holocaust victims in Babin Yar in Kyiv, Drobetsky Yar in Kharkiv was attacked by Russians. Yeah, it's a memorials who built after collapse Soviet Union. Only after collapse Soviet Union, in independent Ukraine, start development Holocaust research, Holocaust education, Holocaust memory culture. It's impossible imagine during Soviet Ukraine. And now Russian regime kill memory about Ukrainian Jews. Again, for me, it's a very strong link between Hitler, Stalin, and Putin. Hitler killed Jews, Stalin killed memory about Jews, and Putin continue kill memory about Jews. It's a terrible, but it's a current situation. About what the last few sentences, about Artem told about relationship with Russian scholars. I stopped my relationship 8 years ago. 8 years ago, one of very famous scholar in Russia, a scholar of World War II and Holocaust studies, wrote me a letter in March 2014, 8 years ago exactly. He wrote, "Dear Anatoly, your center very deeply worked this teacher's history in Crimea Peninsula. Please send me that database of this teacher. For you, they already know, you don't need them. We will continue work with these teachers in Crimea Peninsula." You understand? It's a how example, strong example for me, instrumentalization. In my question, for what historians in Russia research and teach in Holocaust? For what? It's a lie. It's a shame. I don't know. But of course, for me, it's clear. I cannot cooperate. I very good remember 1992, 1993, 94, 5, 6, all 90s. I arrived to Moscow and worked in the archives and participated in a lot of conferences and discussions. But I stopped 2006 and finally stopped 2014. Okay, what I feel, activities of Ukrainian Center for Holocaust Studies and activities of my colleagues will change. We will every time compare situation with human behavior, relationship, occupation, evacuation during World War II and during Russian aggression against Ukraine. You know, I very good remember Anne Applebaum told very correct. Anne Applebaum, very famous American scholar. She researched Gulag, Stalin crimes. She researched Great Famine, Holodomor. Anne Applebaum told, "I remember that Soviet Union won in World War II, and I same remember that Soviet Union started open World War II." And you know, today, in my opinion, Russia already cannot speculate about victory in World War II. Russia today is an aggression country. It's a country who invaded, who attacked independent Ukraine. And we will change conceptual approaches to Holocaust history, to World War II history. And what important, last sentence, what important about some institutions in my country, they support from Russia Federation. This institution must be stopped, already stopped. I discuss now not about political or religious institution. I discuss about educational research institution. It's a crime against Ukrainian memory. We need to stop some institution inside Ukraine. They sponsored by Russia. It's a result of war, one of important. And I very believe in my colleagues. I very believe to everybody. And the last what I told and I forgot, Professor Ivanova, Yelena Ivanova from Kharkiv Karazin University. Artem, Igor know her. Her apartment, her house, it's the same Igor's fate. Total bomb. She was in shelter, only one dress and these documents. But she is 73 years old. I know her last 30 years. She now evacuated as a refugee to Riga. And it's an example, a lot of examples. Our center, we now call to all our teachers, to colleagues, and we try help to everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Anatoly. We're getting some excellent questions, very complex questions that even deserve some separate academic events to dedicate them and discuss them. Like one question is about the usage of the term genocide and how it's relevant to the ongoing Russian aggression against Ukraine. There's also a question from Amber Nikhil. She's asking if you could select one thing that you want us to tell our students and media outlets when they come to us, what would it be? Perhaps one of you, Ihor, would you like to answer maybe?
Okay, maybe only the one thing should be, I think they should understand that the current war will end and we will win, as Anatoly said, and Ukraine will be a renewed and free development country. I hope and I believe it. And also maybe the second point, we need to understand, or we understand, but maybe students need to understand that the struggle against Nazism, we call it Russism, is against Russia, not Ukraine. So there were some questions about neo-Nazi in Ukraine, but it's a very complicated question, but you can see that happened in real life. And if somebody, if Russians said that they are fighting against Nazism and they are destroying monuments of killed Jews or monuments of Soviet army in Kharkiv or like in Izum, you can understand who is real Nazi, not Ukrainians.
Thank you, Ihor. There are several questions that it's asking us about cases and incidents, and one of them it's the stabbing of the head of Jewish community in one of Frankivsk, Ihor Perlman. I don't think that any of us can comment on that as investigation is going on. At least that's what local authorities has announced. And I would like just to read one more comment before one of my colleagues will take a floor again. It's a comment from Elizabeth Ira. I'm an 87-year-old Holocaust survivor and Holocaust educated. I have been bombed by Russians, so Ukrainians supported Germans' persecution and murder of Jews in 1942. This terrible war may help historians better understand the human conditions. I think that everyone on the panel, including me and our audience, is agreeing with Elizabeth, and I think that yeah, it's took it completely different dimensions of understanding. Thank you for that. There's questions about anti-Ukrainian propaganda, and they are dealing more with international relations and contemporary situations. So if any of our presenters would like to take them on, we still have a few minutes left. We got another comment from Elizabeth Edelstein. Dear colleague, thank you for speaking with us today. Your words are deeply affecting. Thank you so much for your words of support, Elizabeth. There are questions about reports about rape in Ukraine, and the person from audience is asking whether these reports are correct. Well, that's what we're listening on the news. So I cannot really ask any of our panelists to wage on that, but that's what I think we will learn more after the war is over. I'm sure that there will be investigations to address this and other issues. There's a question from Otilia Sofron. She's asking, I'm thinking about orphans of Ukraine that get protection in Israel. Will they come back to Ukraine after the war? I have a positive thinking that the war will end tomorrow. I know how bad are conditions, but how do you think about reconstructions? Who will pay for repairments? Dead people are not coming back, but reconstruction must be done as soon as possible. Well, it's a difficult questions to answer, but I think Artem has his hand up. Artem?
If you let me speak words about these Russian accusations, and for me, it's really it's anti-Ukrainian propaganda. For me, it's really sarcasm because my colleagues testified that I always permanent against our right-wing nationalists, about our propaganda in Ukraine, but it was a really inner Ukrainian deal before this war, and I have never had any problem with this. Heavy right-wing nationalist, of course. Heavy anti-Semitism, of course, as any European country, for example. And it was problem for many Ukrainian opinion makers, for many researchers, but you can find any right-wing nationalist in Ukrainian parliament, for example, among Ukrainian politicians, for example. And this is Russian accusations about Ukraine. It's really sarcasm, because I know that before 2014, the real neo-Nazism center was Moscow. And all the literature, illegal literature in Kharkiv, for example, neo-Nazist literature, was published in Moscow. And all this accusation is a madness, sarcasm for me.
Thank you, Artem. Anybody else wants to add anything? We still have a few minutes left. Yulia, please.
Yes, just several words about anti-Semitism, this reported anti-Semitism in Ukraine and Ukrainian nationalism. Unfortunately, there is anti-Semitism in Ukraine, but it's not an excuse, but it's still much less anti-Semitism in Ukraine than anywhere in Europe, actually, according to some polls. And obviously that during the armed conflict, there will be a rise of Ukrainian nationalism, but it's rather kind of nationalism of citizens. It's not like ethnic nationalism. And the most popular pictures, for example, in Ukrainian sector of Facebook, have been two Jewish men, two Ukrainian Orthodox Jews in Ukrainian military uniform, just praying and going to war. It's like a father and son from the city of Dnipro in the east of Ukraine, and so it was never about ethnic nationalism in Ukraine. It's still about. It's about being Ukrainian, and me myself, I'm not of Ukrainian origin, and I'm sorry to say that right now the city of Kyiv is shelled from the area when shelled by Russians and Belarusians from the area when my ancestors used to live. But I can say that I'm ashamed because I have no relation to this territory right now, but still I'm consider myself not like a ethnic Ukrainian, but I'm still a Ukrainian citizen, and for now it's more important for me than ever before.
Thank you, Yulia. Thank you, everyone. We are running out of the time, and there are many excellent questions. And I would like to thank our audience and organizers and our panelists. And just last notice of reminder that the organization you can donate to, it's Razom for Ukraine. It's a New York-based organization. I just checked the website because somebody posted in the chat that they had issues with donating there. The link is working, so please try once again, check your settings, and thank you so much for attendance, for listening to us. Thank you to our panelists and to the organizers. Thank you. Deborah?
Thank you, our moderator, brilliant moderator, very high level, deeply professional moderator. Thank you, Natalya.
I second you, Anatoly. We thank our moderator. We thank all of you. We thank our co-chair, Elissa, who has now come on the screen as well. And we thank the participants. As I say at the beginning, we are honored and we are humbled by your presence with us today. The aim of this event was just to say, we are here. We are listening to you. We would like to help. We stand by to offer our help and our support. So please stay safe, stay well, and let us keep in contact and continue the conversation. Thank you so very much. Goodbye.
Thank you very much.